What do we think of Mapfield? Mapfield.
¿Qué es lo que pienso de Mapfield?
What's the crack? It's your boy D-Murph, and we're here with another episode of the Mapfield podcast, joined by a very special guest. But before we get into it, just want to shout out Rera for sponsoring the podcast this season and holding us down. But this week, yes, special guest, a legend of Belfast across hip-hop, fashion, culture, and electronic music. We've got Noel Watson in the house. How you doing?
I'm grand. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm feeling good. All's good. Just had a good Christmas, New Year, and everything. So just settling in and getting on with the programming and getting ready for some events and things this year.
You're playing this month out for lunch, is it? Or
I'm the artist in residence for this year's Out to Lunch festival, and my job has sort of has been basically programming DJs for the Green Room at the Black Box on a Saturday night here in Belfast. Black Box is a club that I work in, and that the Out to Lunch festival use a lot for a lot of their main events and their bigger artists.
Yeah, unreal. I guess, how long have you been back in Belfast for now?
I've actually only been living back in Belfast since March this year. So about 9 months, 9-10 months basically. Before that, I was here in Northern Ireland, but I was living quite remote down in a place called Ballyquinton in Barhall Bay, which is outside Portaferry, because I have a young family, and we just decided when we came back from London after COVID and that, I've just been stuck in a small flat and just wanted a bit more space and fresh air. And I also wanted to be in an environment that, was going back to nature, because I wanted to do something. Immediately I got back here. I'd been working in the film industry in London for a while and needed a break from that, and wanted to start doing something a bit more creative. Not that the film industry is not creative, but I wanted to do more creative music things. So we rented a huge kind of 18th century farmhouse, and I set up a recording studio there. And then I brought the harpist Ursula Burns down, and Kevin McCulloch, one of the local Irish traditional violinists, and his partner, and some different musicians, and recorded some sessions there. And that was kind of basically really just sort of like documenting musically the area that we were living in, and the fact that we had Neolithic wells and tombs and graveyards close to the house we were living in. So I would set up field recording equipment and just go out sometimes, do field recordings, then bring the Irish musicians in. And it's a work sort of still in progress that I'm nearly there. I'm nearly finished with it, but I'm just editing it at the moment. And then life sort of happens, and I've been busy doing some other bits and pieces. And, just domestic things come into it as well.
Because I imagine like the film industry in London can kind of be suffocating in comparison to going out in a big open farm and being able to spread your wings a little bit. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, the thing is, it's long hours in the film industry, and it's 7 days a week as well. And you're not allowed to really just kind of take on a job for a couple of weeks and then take time off or whatever. If you're in, you have to be there from the beginning to the very end of a project. Right. So that can take up to 6-9 months to a year for each project, and it is very time consuming. My job within the industry changed a lot as well and fluctuated. Some of it was cool, some of it wasn't so cool. So it was a means to an end at the time, and it was just something that happened, and that a door opened, and I thought I'll try something different. I'd been sort of working. I had a recording studio in London, and I was working a lot there, and then needed a break from it. It was just became a bit claustrophobic, and things weren't sort of progressing, and it was starting to get into a little bit of a rut. And I thought I need a break from this, something different. And a friend offered me an opportunity to sort of join a company who worked within the industry, in the film industry. So I thought, why not? The money's brilliant. Yeah. So that was a real, it was great to get all my debts out of the way and, pay the tax.
What sort of stuff were you actually doing when, like, most recently before you left in the film industry?
The last project I worked on was Noel Fielding's Dick Turpin.
Oh, sick.
For Apple. And it was class, actually, because we shot it outside London in this kind of like medieval village. And a stunning location. So it was good fun. Yeah. And the sets were amazing and things, and before that I worked on Top Boy.
remember you saying this.
Yeah, I worked on about 4 series of Top Boy. And
Was this the Channel 4 stuff?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah,
the Summer House, the original stuff?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
things with Kano in it and all of that. And I worked on The Crown for Netflix.
Oh, no way.
And I worked on a lot of the Harry Potter spin-offs, the big movies, the Fantastic Beasts, those movies. But I've done 10 years of it. I did everything, you know. And within that as well, I would jump out and then I would do soundtrack films, independent movies that I'd be asked to do and work on adverts and do other sorts of things. So
you'd be like commissioned to write the music for certain things? Is that kind of it?
Yeah, but the like Top Boy and things like that, I was doing a very menial job.
Okay.
You know, we were locking down film sets and I'd be on set working with, you know, like the ADs, the first AD, and then closing down the set when it was like the camera was turning and they were filming.
The thing that I find so interesting about you is you find yourself in all these different pockets of music, art, culture, fashion and stuff. Why do you think you haven't ended up sticking to one thing? Do you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of people will sort of stay in the same thing, but you've jumped around quite a lot to a very high degree of success as well.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing is, like, I started sort of in DJing originally back in the 80s in London, and purely more or less by sort of accident. You know, my brother and I, we started by sort of hosting house parties in flats in Shepherd's Bush and in Hammersmith just for our friends. And then we bought some big speakers and SL1200s when they were originally first came out. And friends would come and be like 6 people there, 10 people there, 15 people there, 20 people. So we then started, some of the people who were coming to the parties started asking us to play and DJ at some of the wee events they were doing. The DJ thing, I actually, you know, lasted for around about 15 to 20 years. Then, because things are now, everything is online now, and everything is documented. Everything is technology has taken over everything. So people are, you know, no matter what anyone does at the moment, successful or unsuccessful, it's documented. And people look at it online and think, wow, look what they're doing. It's really cool. What we did back then was never documented, really, you know. So there's nobody to judge it or say it was successful or unsuccessful because a lot of people don't know. You know, it's just what it goes by. Sort of the people who were physically there and saw what we did. I regard what we did then, like, you know, you'll see online now somebody will make a post about, oh wow, we've got a gig in a festival in Switzerland or something, or Yugoslavia, and you know that'll be, wow, such a big deal. You know, I used to play all over the world, in Germany, Italy, Spain, America, you know, France, you know, every weekend flying to Italy, you know, every city all over these countries. But with no mobile phones then or computer to sort of like post online to say, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But when I think about it and what we did, my God, it was incredible.
Yeah.
You know, so, and the clubs I played and the events that I did, when I look back on them now, they were big, huge, massive events, you know. Like we opened the Delirium Club at the Astoria in London with the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Run DMC and Houdini, all on stage on the one night, freestyling, you know, after their gig at the Hammersmith Palais or Ballroom. And basically, before that, the parties that we'd hosted and done in illegal, we did a lot of illegal underground raves. And they were, you know, with the Grey organisation, D-Mob, sort of Soho-based collectives that were very fashionable. You know, we had sort of like, you know, back then you'd have Sade dancing at 6 a.m. in the morning on a sawdust floor in front of you, and you know, only 10 people left at that point, the ceilings dripping with sweat or grease, and you know, 6 a.m. in the morning and we were still going, waiting for people to leave. Illegal. So, you know, it's the thing is, I didn't sort of deliberately kind of think to myself, well, I'll do this for a certain amount of time and then I'll do something else. It's just progression. It's just you do get different doors will open. and different things will happen, and you do get, no matter what it is that you're doing, you can get a bit fed up with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I got fed up traveling all over the world DJing, because a lot of the weekends I was on my own. So I'd be sitting there on the roof of a hotel or something, having a spliff at 5 a.m. in Bari in Italy, and the sun would be rising, and I'd be thinking, this is incredible, but there's none of my friends are here, or my girlfriend's not here, you know, because, you know, they don't want to travel every weekend. You have kids and things, so they can't, and other things sort of take place. They've got jobs, things happening. So it was like, oh, I'm getting a bit, you know, I want to sort of settle down now and do something different. I want to, and then after the DJing, we had started to sort of, my brother and I had started to also become involved in mixing records and production.
Yeah.
And then I decided, look, I want to have a break from this, and I want to set up a recording studio. I want to get into production.
Basically, you know, you spoke about all this stuff and how so much now is over documented. Do you ever wish that you were able to document more of that kind of stuff, looking back on it?
Yes, I do. You know, it's a shame that we never filmed a lot more of the events that we did. You know, we had that Delirium event I've just mentioned about the Beastie Boys. We filmed that. We have that documented. Wow. But there was so many other nights with so many great acts. Especially when we took Delirium from the Astoria and moved it then to Heaven, the nightclub in Charing Cross Road, because at that point Heaven had only been used really for a handful of indie gigs. Like New Order did their first gig at Heaven after Ian Curtis died, because I went to it, and I remember thinking, wow, it was the first time I'd ever been in Heaven. And I thought, this place is just insane, it's incredible, you know, what a club. And then years later we ended up hosting a night there, and we had Frankie Knuckles as resident with me there, the DJ from Chicago and New York, for nearly 2 months, and none of it was filmed, you know, which is like a shame now that hadn't been documented. We had you know, Fingers Inc. there, Todd Terry, Marshall Jefferson, Cash Money, Africa Bambaataa, you know, the list is endless of the acts that we had at that club that are regarded now as legendary, you know, and virtually none of it was photographed or filmed. And these were busy nights, you know. We had like 1,500, 2,000 people in there. So that wasn't like they weren't filmed because they weren't successful. It was just because we were all so young. Technology, this sort of thing hadn't really manifested itself, this whole kind of social media aspect, you know. It was just like, we didn't even have mobile phones, you know. Our mailing list, where we got people who would come to the door, pay their money in, and the main thing to do was, email had just been invented. Right. So it was like, get everybody's email address and their address, and that's how you built your crowd, you know, and then flyers and posters.
Yeah. It's crazy to think now the difference and all that kind of stuff. Like, I guess even just to wheel it back, like, you obviously moved to London. What age were you when you moved to London?
Around 19.
And you went with your brother over at that point?
Yeah.
So prior to that, like, what was your life like in Belfast? Because this must have been in and around the Troubles and stuff as well.
This was 1980, around 1980, and at that point I'd grown up in the 70s, and basically, like, to be honest with you, life wasn't too bad. We lived in East Belfast, and you know, when I was sort of younger, when I was sort of like 10, from about 9 years old to about 13, 14, 15, it was pretty grim.
Yeah.
Because we were going to school, and everything at school was all very Troubles orientated. You either had to be part of the gang or part of a certain ilk, or, you know, you got beat up. Yeah. And it was precarious, sort of as you were a younger teenager going into Belfast town centre. There was a lot of, we would drink in Belfast town centre in some of the bars on a Saturday afternoon, but that was it. You know, when come 6 o'clock, it was like, let's get out of here. Yeah. It's too dangerous now. And then we sort of grew up going to discos in Bangor.
Okay, was it kind of out of the way enough that you could be safer?
It was a little seaside town. It was a gig. There was a little night there at we called it the Viking Club, and it was at the back of the Royal Court Hotel. next door to the courthouse now in Bangor, and it's quite an iconic building. And that little club was sort of like the breeding ground in the north of Ireland for young Americans and sort of like punks and trendies. We all would fly over to London or buy our clothes from. There used to be a couple of English guys come to Bangor and parts of Belfast, and they would sell ice cream. They had an ice cream van, and they wore all the gear. And we asked them to start bringing clothes over for us, so they would bring.
So they were coming over to sell ice cream.
They were coming to sell ice cream,
clothes.
yeah. And they started bringing over clothing items,
Right.
and then we would start flying over back and forward to London.
What sort of brands were you getting brought over?
This was all Acme Attractions or Sex Dictionaries,
yeah.
Malcolm McLaren, Vivienne
Yeah.
Westwood, because it was the epicenter of punk.
Okay.
And that's what the Sex Pistols were wearing. So we were really heavily into the Sex Pistols and the whole Malcolm McLaren, Vivienne Westwood thing. And when I was actually 16, I flew to London about 1976. My aunt Belle lived in Cricklewood, and I could sleep on her sofa. And I would go down from Cricklewood down into King's Road and just go to the shops and buy clothes, buy plastic sandals and plastic Macs and T-shirts from Sex and things from Seditionaries and Acme Attractions.
Were your family really culture, music, fashion oriented as well?
Yeah, my mum and dad were hipsters. They were pretty cool. My mum was pretty cool. She was very fashionable, and they were a good looking couple. And we kind of knew this and kind of figured it out. And it was like, we sort of picked up on that a wee bit, me and my brother Morris. And because my mother actually, the first job that we had in Belfast, my mother got me and my brother Mike. She got us to work for the McAllister brothers. There was a tailoring company that was in Ann Street, and they were the bespoke tailors in Belfast. They were a family from West Belfast, and all the gentry from Belfast would go there to have their suits handmade and tailor-made. And I learnt there how to sell cloth and measure people up for suits. And my brother Morris was a tailor,
right,
and he learned how to pattern cut and sew and make suits and make anything.
So you actually had like a technical understanding of clothing and stuff as well.
We picked that up, and so that was kind of like how we, how we sort of got our clothes as well, because we could make our own clothes and go out to the clubs and bars wearing our Bowie. We called them our Bowie suits, like young
and
American
handmade sort of stuff.
Yeah. Morris would make them, and. Yeah, it was, and actually, I mean, I've told this story to a few people. It's like Alex Hurricane Higgins would come in, and I'd close the store when he would come in. He'd ask me to close the shop, so I'd close the shop when he would come in, and then he would come in with his sister, and he had all his waistcoats and suits made by us as well. I would shut the shop, and he'd take me out for lunch. And and I remember going home and telling my dad, we had Alex Hurricane Higgins come into the shop today, Dad, and my dad was like, "What? Jesus," he loved him, you know what I mean? So it was like, he going, "That's mad," but I was just over my head, I wasn't really, but yeah, so that was a really good sort of start for my brother and I to start working, because Morris ended up working for D-Mob in London, and that's how we broke into the DJ scene in London. And then he also ended up working for Comme Des Garçons in New York City. So that all stemmed from our Belfast background.
That's crazy, but it feels like it was meant to happen after that almost, and it's a different part of that world, but it's the same lineage, like.
Yeah.
You were obviously very young when a lot of this is happening. Something I was thinking is, you're saying you're going over to London when you're 16 on your own to go get clothes and stuff. Were you always very like very much like a self-starter and just wanting to go out and do stuff? And
well, I think kind of growing up in Belfast during the Troubles made us fearless.
Yeah.
It was basically like, we'll go over there, and I remember being mugged and attacked by a group of kids on the King's Road, and I thought, no, I'm not having this, and they took my wallet, and I had a wee knife in the heel of my shoe, and I took it out, and I saw them, and I followed them into a famous market called the Beaufort Market, where Johnson's was, and I walked up to the kid that took my wallet, and I pulled the knife on him. I just give me my wallet back, and they just all sat there, and nobody flinched, you know what I mean? and I just walked out. And I just thought, you know, me and my brother were okay. We could handle ourselves. And it's like, growing up in Belfast at that point made us we were fearless.
Yeah.
Jesus, we used to go to New York and go to Harlem and go, why would we get stopped by the police? They would pull up beside us in a car and walking through Harlem and go, hey, white boys, come here. And what are you two doing here? You know, we were like, we're going to a record store to buy records and beats. No, you're not. You're going to get on that train and go back down to Manhattan. And we're like, look, we know who we are, what we're doing. Nobody has bothered us. Leave us alone, you know. And this happened to me in Miami as well. Stopped by a police officer and told, where are you going? And like, as I'm going to the beach for a drink and that. No, you're not. And I'm like, look, you know, I'm just, you know, growing up in Northern Ireland and Belfast during the Troubles kind of like was a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it kind of made you fearless, you know.
So what age did you move over to London then?
I've been dallying, going back and forward from the age of 16, and I then moved there sort of officially when I was about 19.
Yeah, and you'd been living in Hollywood before that, you'd said, was it?
My brother had a little house he had a house share where it used to be an old post office. Now it's something like a hairdresser's. It used to be a wee post office. It's nearly facing the Tesco's that's in the high street.
Yeah.
And we had a recording studio in the basement covered in egg boxes, and we lived there with Harry Binns, who is now living back here, who also relocated to New York, and the Priestley brothers, and a girl called Ruth, and there was a little group of us, and just it was a place. It was like we were like a wee sect, you know, we were like a wee cult of our own. Quite isolated at the time because we were sort of like in Belfast. You know, it wasn't as easy as it is now to sort of express yourself.
Yeah.
In fashion, or you know, Belfast has changed drastically since then. You know, I mean, we were chased and, you know, a lot, and beaten up quite a few times by local gangs in Belfast and Bangor and places like that because of the way we dressed.
It's mad because even now I think Belfast isn't super accepting or open-minded to different styles and stuff like that. Like if you compare it to London and things like that, but
well, you don't think so?
No, not in relative terms. Like I'd say it's changed a lot, but I definitely think people don't feel it's comfortable to express themselves in the same way. And I just sort of wonder, do you think it was being incubated with your friends who were all like-minded that kind of allowed you to continue to dress differently and think differently?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a kind of, you know, once you have that sort of vibe in your blood, and you get a feeling for something, you know, whether it be through music, art, theatre, whatever, and fashion, you know, why let you know, people who are sort of like much less intelligent than you are, who have a Neanderthal opinion in life, spoil what you want to, how you want to express yourself. We were determined not to let knuckleheads hold us back, and you know, the sort of the political situation in Belfast, kind of in a way, it helped a little bit take the onus off us a little bit, because you know, they would get bored with us if there was something else happening down the road, a riot going on. They'd go off and do that. But you know, I do think that kind of I do think it's best to not, you know, to just rise above that and just try to. It's difficult at times. It can be demoralizing. It can lead to a lot of mental health problems for some young people still. Yeah. You know, it's actually got worse in a way because of social media and because of technology and the access people have into people's private lives. I think we were lucky back then that it was still so naive, you know, in a way, and in a sense that you were quite protected once you shut your front door.
I think there's something as well about being creative where if you're constantly being exposed to other people online or having to put your stuff out online, like for the most part, I think people feel like they have to be sharing what they're doing nowadays. Whereas if you don't have that pressure or see what other people are doing, you feel almost more of a freedom to create, I think. Like the times I've sort of shut myself away from social media or taken a break from it and stuff, I feel a lot better. A lot more relaxed to create and not worrying about the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on social media, even though I'm older and it's more of a young person's medium. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, but it's through a necessity nearly because of what I do as a job. But I try my best to avoid it, and I try to stay away from it as much as possible. I try to only post things which are related to a gig, or if I'm playing in Dublin, or if I'm playing in London, or in Belfast. I have something coming up at the Black Box, just to use it as a promotional tool. I try not to engage with it too much on a personal level. I think that it should be controlled a lot better by the companies who are sort of behind these platforms, and it's quite criminal in a way that it's not,
Yeah, all they care about is profiteering and other nefarious stuff that they're doing with their platforms, but it's just the way the world's going with all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I have to say that also there is a positive side to it
absolutely,
too.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast now like this, reaching out to an audience who want to sort of do something or look at something different if it wasn't for technology and for social media. So there is a positive side to it.
Definitely.
It's just as long as you don't let it completely take over your life, that you control it and that you use it as a tool for something positive.
Yeah.
You're not using it to spread hatred or using it to spread, rumors or just like misinformation. So there is a lot of positivity about it too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti technology.
Yeah.
No way at all, because I've always been someone who has endorsed kind of like new technology, new keyboards, new computers, drum machines, samplers. Without that sort of development in technology, I probably wouldn't be here, doing this.
Yeah. It's crazy, and the speed at which stuff's happening now is crazy. I imagine moving from like Belfast to London, was that a big culture shock? My and dad moved in the 80s, I think, for a while, and even they were saying certain fast food places, there wasn't very many foreign fast food places in Northern Ireland at all. There wasn't a lot of different things. It was very incubated. So when they went to London, it just like blew their mind, going to all these concerts, different food, all this kind of stuff.
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, I'll never forget the first moment I got off the train at Euston Station and I stepped onto the platform and I looked around me and the lights and the people, and there was just this electricity in the air, this vibe that I'd never felt before anywhere in my life. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And just seeing the different cultures, different types of people, and then going out and seeing what was going on in the bars and the restaurants and the streets. At that time, London was still quite a small scene. It was based mainly around West London and Central London, Soho, Covent Garden, Oxford Street, and Notting Hill, Portobello Road, where the market was. Notting Hill then was the Shoreditch Hoxton of now. When I moved there, it was like a multicultural scene, very vibrant. You would go to your local shop. Lemmy would be in there. I used to live in a street. Lemmy lived a couple of doors from me, so I would see him every morning walking past my basement flat, going for his newspaper and his fags in the newsagents just off Portobello. And, it was just like Brian Eno all the time, cycling past my window, walking past my house. I went to a party. I actually ended up going to a party at Brian Eno's studios because I then became involved in music and had friends who worked with Brian Eno. And I lived around the corner from his studio. His wee studio's still there, by the way. And, you'd be sitting in Westbourne Grove eating a bag of nuts by the little florist, and Brian Eno would come cycling past, and then you would see the guy that plays a guitar from Pink Floyd constantly, Mick Jagger in your local pub coming in to watch cricket.
The proximity to people that you probably were fascinated by when you were living at home, and then just being in close proximity when you move over there must have been crazy.
It was, but you also have to kind of take it, not be starstruck either by it all, and we weren't. It was kind of like, whatever. It's kind of, you have to don't be a twat about it
Yeah,
either. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
running up
Be
for
cool.
autographs and
You know,
stuff,
don't be cool. Don't go and go hi.
Yeah.
You know, just be cool. And it's like you know, so. And in a way, that kind of also helped Morris and I develop our attitude towards what we were doing, you know, as DJs and creating parties and getting to know people, the right people, because it was like, well, we have seen how this has developed, and we sort of we're young enough, and we've come at the right time when it's still sort of, because this is only 20 years after the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, 30 years after the 50s, after the Second World War and stuff. So London was still really, really quite a young city at that point. People don't realise this. And it was like, it's, you know, now you go there and, I mean, it's huge. And like Peckham,
Yeah.
East London, those Peckham and the areas like that, back in the 80s, you wouldn't have gone near it with a barge pole. You know, it was desolate.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just a wee small tiny scene, but within that scene it was just everything was there. Everybody who seemed to be a mover and shaker from all over the world seemed to be there on your doorstep. The vibrancy was just incredible. It was electric, and it was just, you know, that was it.
Yeah.
You know,
Once you were there, you knew this is the right place to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah.
And you'd mentioned your brother working at D-Mob. I looked online and I found a little photo. Is this one of the shops? Like,
that is D-Mob in Brick. That is in Soho.
Yeah.
In, is it no? It's not Brick Lane. I can't remember the name of the street. Chris Brick and Chris Sullivan were heavily involved in D-Mob. It was Chris Brick and Sarah Sue Brick's shop. Inside that shop, at the back, was a curtain, and behind that curtain, you would go on a Friday and you would pick up your ticket or your vibe for all the illegal parties, your drugs, things that you couldn't get anywhere else. The clothing was second to, it was impeccable. You know, it was just really cool designs. Everybody was in and out of there, and it was really, really vibrant. It was just an incredible scene. That's where Morris worked.
okay.
Yep.
And I'm assuming he made an intentional choice to try and work at something like that after having worked at McAllister's, was it called?
Well, basically, we kind of, it's just at that point, it was, you know, contacts, friends of a friend. Do you know such
But
and
were you
such?
just landed into London not knowing anyone kind of at that
Yeah,
point?
yeah.
That's, it's mad how it works out, because
It took about 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
before we found our feet.
Yeah.
You know, for the first couple of years, we were just working in whatever little jobs we could get. I worked in a vegetarian restaurant in Battersea. Morris he did different odd jobs, working in different shops. And then it just happened purely by a natural kind of progression.
were you going, was there certain like clubs you were going to or venues you were going to where you're just bumping into people like
Yeah.
this? Yeah. What sort of ones would that have been?
I used to go to Le Beetroot on a
Okay.
Friday night and queue up to get in. And a lot of the nights I would go there, I'd go on my own. And I'd go downstairs, and that's the first time I'd sort of like heard a lot of the James Brown sort of B-sides and things. The DJs in there were, it was Dean Thatcher, who then was part of Flying Records and Junior Boyzone and Boyzone, and a guy called Steve White, I think it was. And they were my heroes, basically. And Boy George was there, Spandau Ballet were there, the guys from Wham would be there, but they were all kids at that point. None of them were famous.
Right.
They were all just there as kids.
Before they were
Okay. Famous, yeah.
Yeah.
Hadn't made it yet.
You would
I saw Madonna there actually performing
No
for the
way.
first time, doing her first track right in front of me with two girls beside her. Literally, it's close to me as you are. And, it was just kind of, the DJ's name actually wasn't Steve White, it was Steve, I can't remember his second name, but it'll come to me, but he was my hero. And we would go to Groove Records in Soho and Greek Street, where I would see those guys, and I'd pick up here on, and through the grapevine, this is the place to go on a Friday or blah, blah, blah. So I would go and I would queue up, and sometimes I'd get knocked back and they wouldn't let me in. But other times I'd get in, go downstairs, and then gradually just get to meet people.
Okay.
And I went to a lot of gigs as well. I was really sort of into going to see young bands We'd go and see like Cabaret Voltaire, Pere Ubu, A Certain Ratio, you know, all these young bands that were really happening, hip bands. And there you would meet people.
Yeah.
And people say London is an unfriendly city. That's bullshit. You know, it's friendly.
Yeah.
If you're in the right place at the right time with the right people and you have the right attitude, it's really friendly. And I got to meet so many people so quickly who were really supportive. And, you know, it just all sort of expanded and just blew up from that.
So in D-Mob, when you were going there with your brother, I'm assuming they were getting used to spin records, play a little bit. It was attracting. Was it kind of like a wee hub for people to come through and just enjoy themselves, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
they put on the first illegal warehouse
Right.
parties, speakeasies in these basements in Rosebery Avenue and the Electric Ballroom in Camden.
Yeah.
And Morris and I DJ'd at the Electric Ballroom in Camden and blew the roof of the place. We'd stolen all these American imports from Virgin Records in Oxford Street because we didn't have any money. And we'd go in there every Friday and steal loads and loads of records. Like I'm talking hundreds of pounds worth. And basically then we played them things like Man Parish, Bebop, Soul Sonic Force, Planet Rock, Kraftwerk. And at that point in time, London was sort of like, it was sort of in a little bit of a rut with sort of rare groove and rockabilly in the clubs. And they were playing a lot of rockabilly, James Brown and old soul. Me and Morris sort of started on a bit of we were kind of punky attitude, like we're going to change things up, we're going to play hip hop, and we're going to play electro, and we're going to change things up. And with the turntables as well, we learned to mix and scratch and really learned our craft. Morris was an incredible DJ.
Yeah.
He could do like transform and everything. He was really amazing. So when we would put on events and parties, we would be the only two white kids in London, sort of cutting and scratching and doing things like that. We were at the forefront
where
of it.
were you getting exposed to learn that kind of stuff?
Well, a friend, luckily enough, Tom Binns, who's a jewellery designer, he worked for Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood. He did all of their jewellery and their designs, and he introduced us to Malcolm.
Okay.
And Malcolm would bring over Zulu Nation tapes from New York City
amazing.
and pass us the Zulu Nation tapes. And then we would study the breaks on these tapes and then go to New York and fly back and forward to New York and go and buy records and also, create dig in London.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's, you see now that, no one would be going in their early formative stages the whole way to New York
Just to buy a
just
beat.
to buy, you can learn it all online. You can go on YouTube and stuff.
No.
It's mad.
Didn't happen like that. When we were kids, to get the records that we wanted to play, that we were hearing on the Zulu Nation, the Red Alert shows, the Tony Humphries Kiss FM shows, you had to go to New York to get them. You had to go to New York to get a lot of these records. So we would go 3 or 4 times a year to just go beat shopping.
Mad. Well, and so when you were coming to these parties and you were playing, what's the vibe of these parties? Mad hedonistic, sort of pretty wild parties if they're legal, I'm assuming.
They were, pretty wild, It's like anything went. They were sort of all-night parties that started around sort of midnight till around 7, 8 a.m., 10 a.m. the next morning. We would sell beer and we would get old bathtubs, fill them full of ice and put them on the stage and set a table in front of those and sell the beer from a bath full of ice and charge the kids like $5 or so to get in. And basically set up the Technics turntables, no lighting, just cover the ceilings with camouflage netting. Drug dealers would use the toilets for drug dealing. A lot of it was heroin, speeder heroin.
Yeah.
And basically, but you would have people like members of the Clash, the Pistols there. Massive Attack would always come, all those guys. Jazzy B from Soul to Soul, Malcolm McLaren. I remember Malcolm coming down to one of our parties and bringing us the white labels of Buffalo Girls and things, just coming up on the stage with them. So, and like Daddy G and the guys from Massive Attack just sitting behind me and my brother going, wow, Andy Weatherall and people like that would come to our parties and things, and Terry Farley. And then from the illegal warehouse parties, that was purely mostly funk, hip hop and sort of electro, and then with sort of left field disco, and sort of avant-garde disco and post-industrial kind of, new beat and things. That then progressed into around 85, 86 into the house music scene, just purely because, you know, the music scene was changing. Even in New York and Chicago, hip hop was beginning to sort of die a little bit within a club framework because the tempo was changing.
Yeah, yeah.
And drugs were changing.
Yeah.
Ecstasy was coming. You know, cocaine was starting to get really rife. So kids wanted faster music, things that they could bliss out to. We were all getting a little bit fed up with the way hip hop also was kind of starting to get more militant and aggressive, and was carrying more of an aggressive vibe.
Because it wouldn't work in a club setting, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It for us, that was kind of like anti what the vibe we were trying to sort of,
right. Okay.
you know, we were trying to make it peaceful for people, because all of the kids who came to a lot of our events were the kids that were, you know, left field kids, or kids who were underground subversive kids, their counterculture, and had a hard time in normal life. So they wanted to escape people looking at them, picking on them, being aggressive towards them. We didn't want that. We were the opposite of that. Morris and I as well. We wanted everything. Everybody wanted just, let's have fun, you know. Let's be able to express ourselves. Let's have dance, do whatever you want, dress whatever way you want, take whatever drug you want, you know, just do what you want. Let's do what they were doing in the late 1960s at Andy Warhol's factory. You know, that's the sort of vibe that we wanted.
Yeah. And I guess then you're saying about the music's changing at that point. When did your brother move to New York?
Morris moved to New York around about, I'd say, he moved pretty quick. He moved around 87, 88.
And were you going over to see him much, or what was the crack around
Yeah. I'd go back and forward. Well, we would both go to New York before that to model for Comme Des Garçons.
Okay.
And we would go also for DJ events. Okay. Morris quickly got himself established as a bit of a DJ in New York as well. He played in a club called Mars, and another club called The World, and he ended up DJing at The Choice and at some places with Larry Levan and DJs like that. So I would go to New York, and I would my partner at the time, Bunty, a girl called Bunty, she was a ballerina who danced for a New York City ballet company. So I would fly back and forward to see Bunty and to see my brother. And whilst Bunty was maitre d' of a club there called MK, and MK was this fucking like really serious club that was in Manhattan. Prince and things would be there, and George Clinton from Funkadelic, and she was maitre d'. And I remember being asked to DJ for one of the Funkadelic guys' birthday parties, George Clinton and that, and turning up with my records and playing in the basement. And they had like this staircase that went up into these luxurious floors, and at the bottom of the staircase were these sort of big, huge stuffed Doberman pinchers, and everybody drinking champagne and things like that. And like Spike Lee would be there, you know, people. It was just insane. Jean-Michel Basquiat would be there all the time, and Andy Warhol and Keith Haring. And because we would go to area a lot, we knew Jean-Michel, so we'd go to area to see Jean-Michel DJ and go and hang out. And we had friends, a group of friends there, Andre Walker and people like that. So man, we just ended up in the right place at the right time. It was just like insane. You're
in the right place at the right time in every place. Like, you know, even as the music evolves, you know, and house and starting to come in, you're in New York more when that's happening.
Yeah,
you know,
I know.
Like Paradise Garage, that's all New York, isn't it?
Yeah.
All that's happening. With the likes of Jean-Michel Basquiat and stuff like that, is that just the general scene in New York that you were familiar with then, that's who all joined together, really?
We were lucky through Tom Binns,
because hip hop's like adjacent to that with graffiti and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, the main catalyst for us, the main was Tom Binns, and Tom Binns is Irish. He's from Belfast, and he, working with Malcolm McLaren, and working with Tom hooked us up big time, and then Tom's brother Harry lived with a girl called Karen Benuchet, who now lives in London and is like head of a big fashion company. She hung out in a magazine, and she hung out with Andre Walker. Andre is very high up within the fashion industry in Paris with Louis Vuitton and people like that. But they were complete movers and shakers. They knew Jean-Michel. They knew everyone. And so we would be invited to parties and out for dinner with these people and stuff. So, and, you know, Morris and I were also highly regarded as two wee kind of movers and shakers in our own right as DJs because of who we were hanging out with in London and what we were doing. Yeah. You know, and the parties that we ran. The parties that we ran were all the coolest parties in town.
What gave the parties that edge? That's kind of what I've been wondering because, you know, I was doing some research and looking at the places. There's a place behind King's Cross that used to throw parties. I was reading
Battlebridge.
Yeah. And but what was it about it? Was it the music? Was it the sensibility, or was it all of these things sort of coalescing together?
It was just the whole thing coalescing together. It was just the people involved. You know, there was the core group of us who ran the nights. You know, Sean Oliver was the DJ with me and my brother. Sean Oliver was the bass player for Rip Rig and Panic, the Slits. Hung out with Gareth Sager from the pop group. Pop group guys would all come to the gigs. I worshipped the pop group when I was young. I would go to their gigs. I worshipped the Slits. You know, so this Bristol crew, Andy Oliver, Nana Cherry, Nana and Andy Oliver were involved in our clubs nights as well. They would do the bar some nights for us, Nana and Andy, and the girl Rose Boyd, who did the door. Rose Boyd was Lucien Freud's daughter. Okay. So she was our door girl, and also she kind of run the club. So her brother played bass in a band as well. Beautiful people. And we would go to their father's house in Holland Park, Lucien Freud's house, and hang out in the basement. And, you know, it was kind of crazy when I think back on all of this. But just happened by pure...
What were your parents thinking? Were you ringing back to them much?
Yeah. They would like, where are you now? What are you doing? It's incredible. But it just, you know, they were two wee Belfast people. It was just, all they were just happy that we were happy. Yeah. And that, you know, my mum was super proud of us that we worked, you know, and did photo shoots for Com in New York City. And she would take the L'Homme Vogue to like the Queen's wee working men's club that she would go to and then show all of their friends, you know. I bet you they thought, well, what a pair of... They probably... I remember going there one night, coming back from London and going there one night, and I was dressed in a pair of pinstripe trousers and black brothel creepers from Sedationary Sex, and I had this wild sort of shirt on from Sex as well, and my hair was... I had like a ginger sort of Bowie mullet at the time, looked like completely something like I'd just landed from space. And I remember all of the men in there talking to my dad and going, when I stood up, they're going, he's tall enough to be a police officer. Get him out of all of that you know, gear. And they would use very inappropriate language. We'll soon straighten them out, you know, and say things like that. So I'd stay for a week with my mum and dad, or a few days, and I'd get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean?
Had I read that one of your parents had converted as well to being a Jehovah's Witness as well? So would they have been like...
My mum was a strict Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. Is it interesting then? Because it's probably just a wrong preconception, but I would have assumed they would have been maybe a little bit more conservative then.
No, my mum was pretty cool because she'd been trendy when she was young. They were a good looking couple, so you know, she was into her church, but her and my dad went out and they liked to drink and they liked to dance. They would go down to the Coachman's out in Grimsport. I'd go and pick them up and they would have their dance. They liked going out dancing and they liked to dress up, and my dad loved to drink, you know, so on one hand, my mum was religious, but she also liked to party. Yeah. And it was like, you know, and she also, I remember when because they didn't mind us smoking a joint at home. And I remember them saying, we prefer you smoking dope and taking the wee drugs that you take because you're not aggressive. Yeah. All you do is laugh and have fun, you know, and you just get dressed up. And that's much better than you just coming home drunk and fighting and arguing, you know, because it was members of my removed family who were aggressive. And who were into alcohol. Yeah. So my parents were like, smoke your wee joints, do your wee thing. It makes you more fun and you're having fun. They were brilliant. Yeah. You know, I couldn't have asked for any better. My mum and dad were amazing.
Yeah. That's incredible. And I think you were just touching on, obviously,
God, we haven't even really spoken about too much of the actual other stuff, but in a way that's good, you know.
Yeah.
Because normally I talk, it's the same thing, the electro LPs, the house music thing, you know, Delirium, the clubs, you know. So this is quite nice to talk about something different.
What I'm into, I guess, a little bit more. Because, like, and that was the other thing, like, was digging, trying to find some photos, and
how long is this we've been talking now, by the way?
Probably 50 minutes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
There's this one that came up. So I'd found it online and I was trying to guess what year it was, but then I found that you had posted it years ago, is of this catwalk.
Yeah, that's Morris behind Jean-Michel, and that's me, my back.
Yeah. So I found this on YouTube as well. So you walked in a catwalk for Comme Des Garçons with Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yeah.
Tell me about that and how that happened.
Well, that was just through Comme Des Garçons. We went for auditions in London, in Holland Park, to a small apartment in Holland Park there. Yuki, who was the head of Comme in London, and we had our photographs taken, and we were asked to stand and walk and move, and what we did, who we were, and then we got a call a couple of days later going, "You've been chosen as models." So we flew to, first shows were in Paris, then some shows in Rome, then New York. So we flew to New York, and in the show, Jean-Michel was in part of the show. In fact, we did 2 shows with Jean-Michel. And because Morris and I, as you can see in those photos, had long red hair at that time, and we were the wee trendy London DJs, we got asked to follow Jean-Michel. And we knew Jean-Michel by that stage anyway, Morris did. And even before the show started, you know, the 3 of us, Jean had a studio in the building upstairs, madly, and he said, like, fuck this, you know, we're sitting around here, we're not even allowed to talk to the girls. Naomi Campbell and that were there, the supermodel, and then the Japanese were like, you're not allowed to talk to the girls, leave them alone, you're not allowed, blah, blah, blah. So we're like, okay. And it's like, there's 2 hours before showtime, so he said to us, like, you know, I've got like Mikado Blaster and, you know, I have a bag of drugs, I have a room upstairs, let's go. So we went up there, the 3 of us, sat for about 2-3 hours, and got completely like, I'm talking seriously, trolleyed on drugs, and then we could hear over the loudspeakers downstairs in the main auditorium, Noel Watson, Jean-Michel Basquiat, where are you? Come down, you know. It's like, oh God. So we all rushed downstairs, got ready for the show. The 3 of us were so like, it was unreal, and they filmed it. You know, and then we had like a screening of the film 2 days later, and we went to see it, and Matt Dillon and all these, Mickey Rourke was there, all these American actors who were like the Brat Pack at the time. They are all dressed as teddy boys, you know, to sort of intimidate us London guys for a wee bit. But we went to watch it, and it was just so funny, man. We were just like, you know, watching it going, oh my God, look at, you know, just walking down this catwalk, staggering all over the place. I could hardly even see. I was so wasted. But yeah, just fun.
Fucking hell, that's some story. It's one of them, like, that moment, but he was mega famous by that point, I'm assuming.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And I guess, what was it like transitioning from the London scene into being in New York a lot more then? Because that's the late 80s. So hip-hop was probably going to start coming in a more serious way again soon.
Hip-hop in the 80s, I mean, when I first went to New York, hip-hop was my love. I mean, we would go there to get hip-hop, you know.
Yeah.
And I would go to all of the sort of shops down in New York, go to St. Mark's Square and go into Sounds and places like that. All the discount shops, go crate digging, go up into Harlem, go to Vinyl Mania, all these different places. I can't even remember half their names. But, you know, getting the Public Enemy album, getting records. That's one other thing. It's like Morris and I would bring back things like Cold Getting Dumb by Just Ice, when before it had even hit Europe.
Right.
And we'd be able to drop that record in the Astoria Theatre, and Andy Weatherall and people like that would be sitting on the staircase looking at us with their mouths dropping, going, what the fuck?
Because that's just
this?
not
You know
really
what I mean?
a thing anymore, because everything's so accessible and democratized now, whereas you literally had to go to another country to bring this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, were you bringing anything from London to New York?
Yeah.
What sort of stuff had you been bringing the other way?
Just things like, you know, I suppose, I don't know, like like records that were sort of more like Blancmange 12-inch mixes, ABC 12-inch remixes by Trevor Horn, a lot of Trevor Horn stuff, a lot of things that post-industrial that was becoming discified, and little finds that we would have in London, records that we would play in London, like Princess, Say I'm Your Number One, and we would also drop things like Material back in New York, like Bill Laswell's early things that in New York they wouldn't play. Right. And we would come over and play them, and they'd be like, hey, that's a New York record, but none of our guys would play that. And we were like, well, we play it, and we would pitch everything up and down. Okay. So, at times in New York at that point in mid-'80s, it was a little bit staid, some of the DJs, Yeah, the hip-hop DJs were great, and some of the disco DJs were great, but a lot of the club DJs, they weren't that open-minded.
Really?
Yeah, they were...
Kind of got stuck in their ways a little bit?
Kind of got stuck. Yeah. They were a wee bit, because there was a lot of... It's either black or white there. Okay. There's no middle ground. Yeah. Whereas we'd play anything, no matter who it was by, and just change the pitch of it and mix it all up.
And something I was really interested in that you'd mentioned another time is like the Beastie Boys and you DJing with them and stuff like that. I'd read somewhere you met Rick Rubin and stuff as well, and obviously you had this exhibition recently where you had like Def Jam jacket, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I got the Def Jam jacket through a trip to New York. And the Beasties, as I say, had opened for us at Delirium. I had gone to meet them when they got off the plane because I wrote a column for ID Music Magazine, and I asked Dylan Jones, the editor, who's now the editor of GQ, Evening Standard, blah, 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 could I go meet them? He hooked it up. I went and met them, got on like a house on fire, went back to the hotel with them. Me, the Beasties, and LL Cool J went up on a lift to the top floor. Adam Adrock said, do you want to come and meet Rick? He's in a room over here. Went and met Rick, sat in the room with him, had a chat with him. Then a little sort of minibus came, took us all to a photo shoot. So we were travelling around and we were talking to each other, and then I would go meet them, go out for dinner with them. I remember going out with the Beastie Boys for Chinese meals in Soho with Russell Simmons.
Wow. Yeah, crazy.
And like before we'd do gigs and things like that. And I ended up DJing with them because they asked me to do a couple of private gigs with them at the Marquee Club in Oxford, in Wardour Street in London, at the original Marquee Club.
Who were those private parties for?
Industry people and like, people like Suggs and the Boys from Madness were there, and all of these different bands who they wanted to meet. The Beastie Boys wanted to meet. They wanted to meet Madness and Big Audio Dynamite and The Clash and people like that. So I would take them. I don't even get a mention for this in the book, by the way, so I'm a bit like, kind of like, whoa. But I took them to Mick Jones's house and things like that, but it's kind of like when I got there with them, it was like they would go in and the door would shut on me sometimes. So I was a bit like, oh, okay. But even though I'd played with The Clash and stuff, there was a wee bit of that going down too. There were certain people who were elitist, a wee bit at times. But the Beasties were cool. I'd go and hang out with them in New York, and I got the jacket just one night. It was freezing cold. It was snowing, and I had no coat. And I said, Adrock, can I borrow your jacket to go home? And he said, yeah, take it. And then the next morning I flew back to London, and I couldn't get the jacket back to him. And I said, look, I'm going to take it with me, and when you're in London, I'll get it back to you, which never materialised. Although I do want to get that jacket back to him. That's why I've kept it, because they could use that for charity or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, if you're watching this, we'll send it back. It's a good opportunity to do it. I guess, like, looking back on all this stuff, pretty incredible. Do you, like, I would say that you maybe don't get enough credit for a lot of this stuff, or maybe sometimes it's overlooked, because I don't think I've met anyone from Belfast that's had as wide-ranging impact on culture globally. Well, to be honest,
to be brutally honest with you, no, we didn't get enough credit. We did, I say that, and then there are people who go, yeah, Noel, you did, but Morris and I did it for the love. We didn't do it for money. We weren't business orientated. One of our failures was that we weren't so business orientated. And when the sort of superstar DJ thing happened and the whole thing went techno and trance, I hated it.
Right, okay.
And I kind of turned my back on it a bit. And Morris was in New York at that stage, and then Morris passed away very quickly. His passing affected me quite badly. Yeah. Because my father and him died at the same time.
Jesus.
So they were buried both together, and it wiped me out for a little bit, to be brutally honest. And I kind of like, and also I was playing gigs with people like Paul Oakenfold and that, and thinking, I don't like you guys. I don't like where you are going, and I don't like the way you've hijacked our scene, and you've monetized it, and you're making it into something which it's not.
Yeah.
You know, this, I don't like the superstar DJ thing. I think it's a pile of shit.
Yeah.
You know, DJs are not superstars. DJs play other people's records, other people's music. If you're a DJ making good music of your own and playing it, I all day long, you've got my respect. But to stand there and play other people's records and think you're better than those people who are making the records, no, you're not. You know, you're only a tool playing somebody else's music. You're not the talented one, they are. Yes, you have to have a certain amount of talent as a DJ. You have to be able to keep a room, the vibe going, build a crowd, and there is work to be done when you're putting on events. But, you know, I don't think it merits the sort of credibility that some of these people have. Yeah. I think that they're way, way, way above their station, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with that kind of. I'm quite a humble person, and I don't like I just think it. You know, there's no need for that. You know, DJ should be low key, should be there just providing a soundtrack.
Yeah.
You know, you're playing other people's music. You know, so stop thinking that you're better than everybody else. You know,
I actually seen a club night in Dublin is hiding DJs away so that no one can see who they are. There's 4 different DJs play. It's in the dark, and it's no one knows who they actually are playing. And I think that kind of brings it back a bit to it's $5 tickets or whatever, and it just brings it back to what it was supposed to be. Because back in the day, a lot of the time people just wouldn't have known who the DJs were, what they looked like. The amount of times I've said to mum and dad about being places, and they'd say, you know, you didn't actually know what these people looked like. You might have heard of them or heard about them or enjoyed the music in the moment, but it wasn't about who someone was necessarily.
No, I mean, there were elements of when we did the Astoria, and you have 3,000 people there, and a lot of the kids are sort of looking at the stage waiting for the act to come on, and they're looking at me and Morris, and we're doing cutting and scratching, and they're watching us. That was good. And that was cool. But it's like a lot of the warehouse parties that we did, people couldn't even see us, you know, as well. We were up above them on a mezzanine, you know, sort of like, so we were high up and the crowd were below us. Half of them couldn't even see us. So, and it wasn't important for them. They didn't have mobile phones so that they could photograph you or film you, you know. That whole thing hadn't happened at that point. So a DJ was just somebody who was in the background playing good music, you hoped, you know, and that was that, really.
Is there any stories you've never had the opportunity to talk about that kind of have burned on your mind, or things that have happened to you that you're like, God, I'd love to have shared that? Because I feel like anytime, even for context for people listening, like we've hung out a few times and talked about loads of them, and I forget about half of them now. I feel like we should have saved them for the podcast.
Yeah,
but
I know. I did say that. Well, we should have done the podcast first, and then became friends, or started hanging out a wee bit and talking. To be honest with you, right at this moment in time, I can't really think of anything that. To turn it around, like, what are you looking forward to doing now? Because basically, well, you know, that's one thing actually to end this really on, is like, you know, there is a big sort of movement out there at the moment, even with older DJs. They're like, it's anti kind of nostalgia. You know, people like myself, they probably think, he keeps going on about his past, you know, whatever. We look forward, we're about the future. Well, you know, the past is the future. And basically, I'm artist in residence at the Black Box for the Out to Lunch Festival. I've been asked to DJ for a fundraiser for Palestine and Gaza on March the 2nd in London with Paul Cinnamon from The Clash, Jerry Dammers, David Holmes, Bobby Gillespie. So, you know, the list is endless. It's a huge thing. I've been booked for Glastonbury for this year.
Oh, wow.
You know, already. I've got other events coming up. So basically, I do look towards the future. I do want to do new things. I don't want to dwell on the past. I'm still really heavily into new music. There's so much incredible music out there. So I'm not one of those people who dwell on the past. I want to stay with the times.
Yeah.
I think it keeps you young.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in my early 60s and I'm still here doing this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you know, that's quite an achievement in itself.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm in a good place about it all still, and very, very happy with how it's all panned out. It's like going and just touching on things back in the day. It's like going to clubs like Area, Danceteria, in New York City, and seeing DJs like Jean-Michel, because he would DJ and things at clubs, and Red Alert and people like that, and Justin Strauss. You know, it's like some of the times in the events that we were part of, going to the World and on New Year's Eve, and you'd have Trouble Funk in the room downstairs, and Dr. Funkenstein from Def Jam, and upstairs Frankie Knuckles and Larry Levan back to back all night long, you know.
Insane.
And my brother would be there as well, playing with them early in the evening, because he was one of the residents at the World. Things like that, you know, to have that as being part of my life is incredible. And so, you know, there are times where, yes, I do get a bit sort of, you know, wary of, like, you know, the fact that we haven't been, we're not as much, as well known as what we could be, particularly myself, because I'm still here and still doing it. But, you know, I always knew in the back of my, I always thought longevity is going to come through respect.
Yeah, absolutely,
You know,
man.
it's not going to come through a quick hit.
Yeah.
And also being one of these so-called superstar DJs. And a lot of the guys that were my peers at the time have fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm quite pleased with how things have progressed. And if people don't know who I am, it's not my problem. It's, you know, it's so that it's out there, and you know, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. And I think that was why it's just good to have a chat and talk about these sort of stuff, so that it is documented. I think it's important to document stuff in a meaningful way, and talk about these things, and also introduce younger audiences to stuff, because at the end of the day, like, you know, you talked a lot about the people that inspired you and how it moved on, and, like, you know, your fingerprints are over other things that have inspired people, and there's a lineage that you're a part of, and people my age might be inspired by something they didn't even know you'd a hand in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that understanding your reference points and stuff is super important to be able to pay homage, but also to just understand where it all comes from.
Well, it kind of also it goes full circle as well. Like, for example, I have a remix coming out in about a month's time for MC Globe,
Okay.
for the Soul Sonic Force.
Yeah.
And Egyptian Lover has mixes on the same 12, and the world famous Supreme Team.
Yeah.
So the world famous Supreme Team were the guys who made Duck Rock with Malcolm McLaren.
Yeah.
And Egyptian Lover is one of the tracks that we mixed on the Electro albums.
Yeah, I was going to say.
MC Globe was part of the Soul Sonic Force.
Yeah.
And this label's coming out of Dublin.
Yeah.
You know, Resume Records. So basically, that in itself is something which is incredible, and it's come full circle. So you know, the future is there.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's you know, you just don't know what's around the corner sometimes, and you've just got to stay focused, be positive, and, you know, make sure that when you do get these breaks and they do come along again, that you are sort of, you know, in a good frame of mind and a good way, a positive attitude about it all, and then make sure that you take it and use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point to end it on. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a great chat.
Thank you so much for inviting me here,
Yeah.
Dylan. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.